Hey everybody, it's CountJackula, your favorite satanic streamer, and with me today is Liam from Ask Lovecraft.
Hello.
Oh, so how you been, man?
I've been doing very well. It's an honor to be back on the show. It's been a while. I think it was what was it, about 3 years ago that I came
Yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. It was about 2 years ago. I remember. I think we were all still on Channel Awesome at the time.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, we were. So
yeah.
this would this is after the deluge. So much has
Yeah.
changed.
Oh God, yes, yes. How is it? I gotta ask, like, how's it been? How's that been affecting the popularity of the show?
So I think my raw number of views have definitely gone down. I sort of keep track of this, and I think the number of folks who just had just eyeballs on the show went down. But my engagement has gone up in a massive way. Sort of
Yeah, yeah.
when everything went down, I kind of decided I needed to take it upon myself to be more in control of sort of the community and I, with Channel Awesome, I would try to go in on the forums and I would try to engage, but it was a difficult place for me to feel like I was kind of uh being able to really communicate with folks. There'd be one or two folks who would kind of comment on the videos and I try to respond back, but there wasn't, folks were watching or at least clicking and then clicking to something else. But I didn't really get that much of a sense that there was a lot of back and forth, and so I made a conscious effort to take more control, be more proactive in community building and community engagement, and the result has been much better. I
Yeah,
have sort of a lot more interaction with folks, and I feel like I'm talking with other Channel Awesome creators more.
I know the
uh, you
the
know,
irony, right? The irony, you know. It's
well, and it's
tough, tough
it was interesting,
times.
right?
Tough
Because
times
yeah,
create like kind of like a fellowship in the trenches kind of deal.
precisely. Well, it's so funny, right? I got to Channel Awesome because a friend of mine who had been trying to get a spot on Channel Awesome for a while said, "Hey, they're doing these sort of auditions. You should send your stuff in. I'm going to be sending my stuff in. I think it'll be good." Sort of as a side note was like, "Oh, okay, sure." I hadn't heard of Channel Awesome. I was sort of in my own separate sphere of the internet, and so when I sent in a video and I sort of forgot about it and then got an email a little while later saying like, "Congratulations, we are very happy to have you as part of our organization." And I thought, well, okay, I got to figure out just what I'm a part of now.
Yeah, that would
And
be Derek. That'd be Derek the Bard, wouldn't it?
yep, that was Derek, who sadly, I think, sort of hung up his headphones.
Yeah, he
Chasing the
did.
Muse was a show because that's how I got my start. Was I did a stage play as H.P. Lovecraft, and then Derek asked me to come on his show and do some Lovecraft stuff, and I was like, oh, I can do this. I can take this character and run with it, and that was 7 years ago, and somehow I'm still doing it. So
Yeah, well, I remember those first videos because like people were like, "Dude, you gotta see Derek's new one. The guy who plays Lovecraft is fucking amazing," and I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, let's check it out."
yeah, it was that. And well, those early videos, I'm amazed I still have viewers after that. When I go back and watch, it is rough, rough, rough.
Well, it's not.
But these
It's
things have
not
to start.
only. Yeah, it's not only rough, but it's a lot more. It's a lot more. Oh, H.P. Lovecraft was kind of a fucked up guy.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how my portrayal has changed over 7 years. Because there was definitely I hit a point a few months in when I actually started reading his letters because I'd read his stories and I'd portrayed him on stage, so I sort of knew him from that. But I hadn't done a lot of direct research beyond that. I found a local library had a whole bunch of the published collected letters, and I have some of them back there. His ones with Robert E. Howard, uh,
Oh,
uh,
jeez.
and which are mind-boggling. Like
I,
they
I, w-
wrote these just massive, yeah,
I
yeah,
was
massive letters
about
back
to
to each other,
say.
and it was, and then they would like, for the most part, you'd be nodding along, like, oh, they're talking about art and they're talking about history, and oh, now they're talking about Negroes. This isn't going to go in a good direction. Um, Like, I don't think they ever
Yeah,
tried to directly, like, out racist each other, but it got close.
there's a little bit of the like two guys that didn't understand other cultures very well, like kind of playing into each other a little bit unconsciously because that kind of that
Well,
happens.
he well, Well, it's also the like two guys who are used to being the smartest guy in a room, sort of like
Oh
facing off
yeah.
each other, and there were some interesting like the fights they get into are really intense, and because they're writing, it's like these massive, lists of rebuttals going back and forth.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Geo Knight's bringing up missives from a sadly intolerant mind, and I'm like, yeah, yeah. What would you say? Like, I feel like those letters are a bit more. They're a bit Tolkien's letters to C.S. Lewis, but with some racism involved.
It's it like what the letters showed to me, and I think how they've really impacted the show is they showed me what a range Lovecraft has. And I think whether you're
Yeah.
a huge Lovecraft fanboy or whether you're a huge anti-Lovecraft critic, I think people tend to reduce him down to certain set elements. Either he's just this intolerant bigot racist who maybe wrote some nice stories, but like, is sort of, we're going to parse him off here, or he's this tortured genius who like, locked himself away in the attic and was, understood my pain because he was a nerd like me and he drew monsters in his notebooks like I did. And he was a lot more. He was funny. He was catty. He was self-deprecating. Bobby Deary, a friend of mine, wrote a book about which I have over there somewhere, which is sex and the Cthulhu mythos, talking
Oh
about
yeah.
the things Lovecraft wrote about sex, because I think people again view him as this kind of like Ken doll, like sexless sort of automaton, and he wasn't. By all accounts, he and his wife had a healthy or a perfectly adequate sex life, and he talked about sex. I mean, he talked about sex. He talked about birth control. He talked about like he was engaged in these
Wow, that
conversations. He
is
wasn't just someone who
fascinating.
like saw some ankle and like had to go to a fainting couch.
Right, right. Like, well,
That's what people think about. They say like, oh well, his racism isn't so bad because he really hated everyone and he was a shut-in and a misanthrope, and he wasn't.
that's
He
not
was
no.
really engaged with people. Like he was writing. He had like dozens of correspondence by the end of his life. Like you don't take the effort to write to people if you hate people, right?
Yes,
Like,
yes, exactly. It's
well, I mean, we do now because we're on the internet, and
well,
so
yeah,
we,
but
we
back
get our hate out
back
that
when
way.
a letter took like a week or more to go back, and it took you hours to write something, you didn't put that much effort into talking to someone unless you either really had something to say or you really wanted to talk to them.
And he was engaged, like he was trying to connect people. He was trying to be like, oh, you're an artist, you need to be in touch with this editor, and oh, you're like a poet, you need to be aware of this artist, and maybe you guys could, like, he was trying to get people to collaborate, and he was offering advice. And so again, he contains all these multitudes. The bigotry and racism and the like calling for genocide are definitely there and
Yeah,
can't be
yeah.
ignored. But as I tell people, if I've done anything in my show, is I've really tried to highlight that humanity and highlight that messiness, because either it's easy to look at him as a caricature, as just this sort of still photograph glowering through the decades.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you know I try to capture that humor, that sort of wryness. What I've created has definitely become its own thing, right? Like I call it a homunculus. I'm not actually H.P. Lovecraft. I'm this sort of iteration, of him, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah. You're this
play up
version of
the
the
whole.
character, of a character
Well,
based
that
on
he's reanimated and he's in the 21st century, and that's going to change how you interact, right? Like if I were sit back to the 1930s, I would be a very different Leman.
Oh
How I
yeah.
interact and how I had to like engage myself and how I had to sort of tread carefully.
Yeah. Me and my
It's kind of
friends have
yeah.
talked a lot about like what we would have been like back in like, 20s and 30s, and we came up with the realization that we probably just would have been bootleggers. Um because because of the way we because of the way we were living. We were going from party to party, we were going from state to state, going to these conventions, and we were dealing because the main guy who was in charge dealt in bootleg videos. We were kind of dealing in a form of contraband, and they're like, what, like, who would be the gunman? And we were like, oh, that'd be Sarah. She'd be the one with the Tommy gun, like, you never take us coppers. Like that'd be her. I would be your man in Chinatown, be like, Mr. Wong is not very happy. and all
It's
that
good to
kind of
know. It's
stuff.
good to know where we all stand in these places. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have. I most likely would have contracted some horrible disease in childhood and died. Like
Yeah.
that's that's how you get out of playing the time travel game.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man.
Breach childbirth. So I definitely would have. I would have died, and I would have taken my mom with me. So like I don't even get to like day one.
Oh.
So I know
Oh. I can't remember. I don't know what
gynecological
kind of birth I
technology.
was. I don't know if I was a C-section or not, actually. I never thought
Yeah,
to.
I was a C-section. Which there were C-sections that they could be performed. Yeah, anytime it's like anyone's like, yeah, I had mild asthma, so I would have been dead, you know.
Yeah, yeah. You're either Teddy Roosevelt or you're dead, like at that point. Oh, someone's got a question is have you read Alan Moore's Providence, and what are your thoughts on it if you have?
Okay, I think that's the one with the really graphic pool scene. So if the question
I
asker can
believe
confirm,
so. I believe so.
I have yes, I have read that, and it's Alan Moore. It's all right. It's sort of strange and graphic. It's not my favorite thing he's done. Um, I think in other works of his, he's had like Lovecraft more. I don't know. I feel like he's played with Lovecraft and Lovecraft's themes better elsewhere, more subtly.
Yeah, yeah. I would.
Like in Swamp Thing and stuff like that. I think Alan Moore was worked on Swamp Thing. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
it
totally did.
felt I don't know. It felt exploitative, which I guess is uh, par for the course. But yeah, it didn't really grab me in any particular way.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Um,
And I mean, I'm not, and I like Alan Moore. Like I've got my Watchmen over here, and I like the V for Vendetta. Like I'm not I think Alan Moore popularity kind of goes in and out of vogue every now and then. Um,
yeah, it's very
Usually
odd,
in
and he's
proximity to a movie.
yeah, and he's only his writing has only gotten stranger. I have been reading his last book, Jerusalem, which is a
Oh,
pure text.
okay.
It's pure text, and it's I don't know. The best way to put it's his Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
And the weird part of it is that it's one of those works of literature that you look at it and you're like, no, you're entering into some James Joyce territory. There are people are going to be studying this one for a long time to fucking come because of everything he's doing with language. And I've only gotten 50 pages into it, and I realized something about the way the book was written, and I was like, okay, I got to put this down for a bit. It was realizing that every paragraph was written with the same sequence of events.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Everything, it starts in the past. You get into something either imaginary or liminal, like of
Okay.
the gods or whatever. And then someone does
Yeah.
something completely mundane, remembers where they were, and then we start over again. And every paragraph's like that. And I've been reading 50 pages of this before I realized that was happening, and I just kind of did the I got to put this down. Like I just my mind is blown. you know.
I was really into Robert Anton Wilson for a good long while,
Oh
the
yeah, me
Illuminatus
too.
trilogy and the historical Illuminatus. And then, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I sat down to read some of his nonfiction, and I'm like, this is somehow more strange and off-putting.
Yeah, the most interesting one that he did of the nonfiction books was I think Prometheus Rising.
Okay.
Because yeah, like, I've read that one too, and that one's kind of interesting because the first half of the book is like purely a potential psychological model of the human mind.
Like you do.
Yeah, like you do. But after a bit, you get into this weird territory where you're talking about how people deal with concepts that may or may not be real, and that's when it gets truly strange. It's a really interesting foray into potentially the way human beings deal with what Jung called the unconscious, but that means we're dealing with things that are just purely of thought. So what is that?
Did he get into the messages he keeps receiving from the dog star? Because that's always my favorite stuff.
I don't know if it was that one. But I know
Because
what
I
you're
think I can't
talking
remember
about.
It was like
I think
signals,
that's
or it
I
had
think
some
I think
very
that's
sort of
I think that's Ishtar Rising.
prosaic.
I think that's Ishtar
Yeah,
Rising.
like taking peyote and like the Virgin Mary coming to him, but it was actually a being from the Dog Star, and like, oh, okay, so yes,
Yes.
I'm now. What's happening?
Yeah. I've known a lot of people who've had those types of experiences. I've had one myself. They're very odd, and it's one of the reasons I'm very, very careful to state the difference between what I believe is fact and what I believe is simply belief, because I like to keep my feet on terra firma.
Well,
I
something
like
like
to
what
know what reality is. You know?
well, it's interesting, right? Like I was talking, who was I talking? I was talking with Scott Glancy, who's a major. He's a game writer, but he's also just a massive conspiracy buff and collects conspiracies because he's a game writer and likes to,
Right, right.
fit them in. And we got to talking about how kind of like ironic conspiracy culture, in a weird way, feels like it kind of has fed into our current era. We're sort of conspiracy and like we just don't agree upon established truth. It's like, sure, there's a dangerous number of folks who believe like that there's a pedophile pizza chain run by
Yeah.
Satan worshiping Democrats, but like that literally sounds like something out of an Illuminati game,
It
like
does,
that
doesn't
literally,
it?
and so with this whole kind of Discordian mindset of like we're just gonna freak the norms and come up with all sorts of like random stuff, and what is reality anyway, man? To like live in society and we've got a lot of bad actors who are willing to exploit folks who are willing to
Yeah.
sort of crave conspiracy. I wonder if we're vaguely like compromised by by kind of the
I
sort of ironic
I think
conspiracy culture.
I don't think you're wrong, because there is a whole lot of people who I don't think understand the difference between fact and fiction, and how to figure out the difference with a certain degree of accuracy. There's always going to be like that percentage that we just kind of don't understand because we're limited to whatever the human mind is. But for the most part, like I know that I always look at, whenever I look at a conspiracy theory, I realize I will fall for an Onion article way before I fall for a conspiracy theory. Because it's sort of like, oh, Donald Trump outlaws corn. Oh, okay, that seems accurate.
That makes sense. Sure, why
Yeah,
not?
and I'm just like, oh, that seems accurate. Woo, move on
Well,
to the next one.
but
But
the onion has done like, because the onion has to deal with the fact that we have a reality that seems stranger than parody. Like they've had to up the
yeah,
game. Clickhole and Patriot Hole. If you ever go to their Patriot,
yeah,
like at first glance, I would just be like, oh, here's something that my like second cousin is sharing because it's from you know taking our guns.ru, so
yeah.
it's
It's how to put it. It reminds me very much of like the what was it, the New Republic, the paper that Rorschach keeps sending his notes to in fucking
oh.
Watchmen. Stuff like I've seen the proliferation of places like that. And back in the 80s, it was like, well, maybe the truth will get out somehow, man, even if no one believes it. But then you realize, oh, wait a minute, the problem is that these places have absolutely no interest in what the truth is. They have no
there
interest
there is no,
whatsoever.
there is no spider Jerusalem. It's all
No.
just
Yeah, there's none of that. Guy does not exist. We want him to be like there's barely even in like a what's his name, R.J. Reynolds. Oh God, what was the name? He smoked all the time. He really hated fucking uh McCarthy.
oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, like that guy. We don't even have that guy anymore. You
Well,
know.
again, it's that lack of consensus, right? Like we don't have a sort of consensus society, which is good in some ways because the consensus society for a long time was like white men in charge, everything's a okay,
Yeah.
and and we've moved beyond that, which is I'd say a good thing, and we're taking steps to try to hear lots of different voices and encourage there to be diversity of voice, diversity of thought. But then there is again this like non-zero and dangerously high number of folks who believe crazy stuff and dangerous
Yeah.
stuff, and then take guns into abortion clinics because they believe these dangerous stuff. So
Yeah. Well, it's always the thing is that when I really look down at people who like go that far, they always it's always I notice that the same thing keeps happening. Years ago, I equated it with simple yeah, wanting notoriety, wanting infamy. If you can't have fame, you can have infamy. I equated it with that, but then I realized there's actually a deeper level to a lot of it. Because you got, on the one hand, you've got people who are purely psychopathic. Like they're so psychopathic that they just, whatever, just time to kill people. That seems like a thing to do with Sunday. Um, and then what you have a lot more of are people who are still psychopathic, but have been activated by believing that they have to do this. That if they don't, the consequences are dire. And I'm always like, but what are the consequences? What do you believe the consequences are? And here's the thing that always freaks me out. They don't have an answer. They never have a satisfactory answer. It's one of those like, we can't let Jews be in charge. And it's like, okay, well, let's take for a minute that's happening. Why is that bad? And they don't have an answer. They really don't. It all just comes down to, because I'm not one of them, usually. Because sometimes you meet the anti-Semitic Jewish person, and then like you're just like, I don't even know where you are. You're on Mars, man.
well, who was it? Oh, there was the great movie Ryan Gosling did, Believer, based somewhat on a true
Oh,
story. But yeah, it was
yeah.
about a Jewish guy who decides he's going to run with the Klan for a little while. Um, heavy stuff. Most at that point, I think all I knew Ryan Gosling from was Young Hercules.
Yeah.
So it was a
Yeah.
little like, oh, hello, we are branching out.
Yeah. Oh, Joe Care has a question. Here's a question I think you'll appreciate. Do you play RPGs?
RPGs. I am looking at my massive stack over here that well, okay. In theory, I play RPGs. I collect RPGs.
I know what you mean.
But no, I do actually play. I have a semi-regular Dungeons and Dragons game. One of the perks of living in a college town is you're sort of trapped with a bunch of other nerds.
Oh
So,
yeah, you just kind of find it, you know.
um, but yeah, no, I've been playing game. I've been playing role playing games for a long time. My brothers were huge gaming nerds, so I had all their books in the house. And before I could read, I was flipping through the monster manual and trying to figure out what was going on there. Well, and that's I knew Lovecraft related stuff through gaming long before I ever read any of his stories. I mentioned uh with Illuminati game, that was the first time I'd ever heard of Cthulhu. Was the Servants of Cthulhu were a faction you could
Oh
play in the
yes.
Steve Jackson Illuminati game. So that's all I knew Cthulhu from for years, was as this ridiculously overpowered, needed to be nerfed faction. um, and then in college, I played a little bit of I played Delta Green, actually. Speaking of Scott Glancy, who designed Delta Green,
Oh,
and it
that's
was
where
like,
I
oh,
know him
okay.
from. Yes.
It's like, oh, this is dark and strange. And then played some Call of Cthulhu in college. So I definitely came to Lovecraft through that sort of element, being exposed through him, as kind of a game genre, right? Like Eternal Darkness, the old GameCube game. It was a great horror GameCube game. Was just Lovecraft with the serial numbers filed off, and I played the crap out of that
Yeah,
without ever knowing.
wasn't that Perfect Dark, or was it Alone in the Dark? Alone
The
in the Dark
perfect dark.
2.
This was Eternal Darkness, Sanity's
Eternal
Requiem.
Darkness. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it was the game that had the sanity meter, which as it went down, the game would start to mess with you. It was like fighting Psycho Mantis. Like suddenly your controller would do weird things, or the screen would begin to tilt, which was really great.
Yeah, yeah. I had one. Yeah, what was it? There was another one that they did. I think was it Dark Corners of the Earth?
They kickstarted a kind of spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness. I don't know if anything ever came from that, but I remember at one point they were like, from the makers of Eternal Darkness comes this other game, which we don't have the license for the original name, so it's like it, but slightly
But
different.
slightly not. Yeah, but I would have thought H.P. Lovecraft would have been in public domain.
Well, you know what? It's interesting. There have been games based on H.P. Lovecraft. There is a Call of Cthulhu game out there, and his stuff does get used. I think elements of his stories can be used without there being any issue. It's weird. Like it's a gray area. I think there's like a handful of folks who have like sort of made the claim that they have ownership, where they have kind of right of first refusal, and so folks, to avoid legal battles, like if there's a movie,
Yeah.
tend to just pay them off and be like, okay, whatever, we don't want to deal with this. But I mean, craft books that are out. I was actually part of I got asked to write a forward for a collection of Lovecraft stories, and I have a lot of friends
Oh,
who've made anthologies that will include a Lovecraft story. So yeah, so I think he's mostly in public domain, but you would have to speak with a copyright lawyer to really kind of nail down uh, what there's certain versions of Lovecraft stories that have been cleaned up. St. Yoshi, a big biographer and editor and sort of collector of Lovecraft's work, he has made kind of definitive versions of Lovecraft stories. And if folks try to use those, like make an animated
yeah.
dialogue or like make a collection, then he gets on the phone and has strong words.
Oh, geez. And Alazy is asking if we've seen the poster for the Color Out of Space film that they're making right now.
Oh, I've seen stuff coming out of it, just because it's obviously making the rounds of
Yeah.
Lovecraftiana. This is the Who's involved with this?
This
I could easily Google
is
it, but I'm being too
the
lazy.
sorry, I
Nicholas
have to.
Cage is this the
Yeah, it's
Nicholas
Nicolas
Cage one?
Cage. The director is Richard Stanley, the guy who did Hardware.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, and
So that's exciting.
yeah, yeah. He also did. Unfortunately, he also did the Island of Dr. Moreau. But if you watch the documentary, what was it? Not Heart of Darkness, but oh god, there's a documentary all about the creating of the Island of Dr. Moreau.
Things that
About
did not go well.
yeah. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see, Island of Dr. Moreau. No, it's not. Lost Soul. The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. If you watch that documentary, you forgive Richard Stanley for everything that happened. Although because you find yourself going, oh, I get it. You were a dude who was just so in over his head. There was no way out, and on top of already being in over your head, the fucking studio was fucking with you the entire time.
Yep, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
Those like failed movie documentaries, like they're a little hit or miss. I found Lost in La Mancha to made me want to like slip my wrists watching that movie. Like it was just so depressing. It's just like Terry Gilliam just like collapsing like a flan throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah. It's like, well, I don't know how to put it. It's like Don Quixote was his Don Quixote. Like I thought for the longest time, like he was just gonna fucking die on that bed, like, it's all pointless, and there was gonna be no rewritten edition where Sancho Panza and Dulcinea come in and fucking perk him up, you know.
but then you have something like Jodorowsky's Dune, which, granted, like the film, uh, it was a choice, whether it was a good choice or not. Avoided the fact that he committed some pretty gross assault in some of his other films, but the Jodorowsky's Dune is very much more of a celebration of film and like feels more like triumphant within the failure that takes place.
Yeah, it's
Jodorowsky himself,
snatching.
again, there's a lot of troubling stuff.
Jodorowsky's he's such a strange guy. He's such a strange guy. Like I actually, as an artist, I really admire him, and as a mystic, I find it fascinating. A lot of the stuff he does I find fascinating, despite the fact that there's some things that he's some of the fiction that he's read where I've kind of gone, like my favorite being my quote unquote favorite being the White Dalai Lama. Yeah, that gets a little not so sure about that one. But a lot of the other ones are really good.
Well, and again, it's interesting looking at like films about films that do not work, right? I'm interested. I think Netflix just put out, they finished an Orson Welles movie. Orson Welles like
I seen
made,
it. Yes.
okay, so okay, you can speak more to it, but it was interesting that it was kind of already an Orson Welles movie about cinema and about film. The meta re-edit of this film about film, like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
Russian
It's
doll, but
yeah.
you
You
know,
can
slightly
you
different.
can tell. Well, you can tell that what had happened was they were doing a documentary about this, lost Orson Welles movie, and while they were doing it, because I don't know how else to put it, because we kind of had a war in the Middle East.
Yes.
Yeah, the rights got freed up, because a government collapsed,
Oh,
and
that's right.
yeah, yeah, because the
I
government
forgot that there was
collapsed.
that whole element of
Hmm.
it.
And famous Hollywood guy, he did Targets, one of my favorite movies. Peter Bogdanovich,
Okay.
basically went, I'll I kind of he's like, no, he was like, no, I want it. I want the footage. I was Orson Welles' one of his best friends. I'm the last friend he has that's still alive. Give it to me. And as they were doing the documentary, um, they figure he was like, well, I don't know what to do with this. And as Netflix had made the documentary, they were like, would you like to finish it? So they released the documentary of the lost film with the completed lost film on the same day. A realization that flipped my brain out, because, like, we were sitting on Netflix. We were like, hey, there's a documentary about, like, the lost Orson Welles movie. Oh, shit, let's watch that. So we're watching it, and then we're like, oh my God, this fucking Other Side of the Wind movie sounds like it would have been amazing. What if only we could watch it? We get to the end of the
If you like
documentary.
this, you'll like.
Exactly. And we were like, wait, is that just telling it? That's got to be recommending the documentary again? There's no way. Punch it. And so we watch and we're like, holy shit, it's the movie. Netflix, you bastards, you magnificent bastards. And so we watch it, and we were, I don't know how to say it, but it's one of those things where if you, God, how best to say it? Realizing that this was a movie made back in like the mid to late 60s, you find yourself going, God damn it, Orson Welles was just ahead of his time. It's a movie unlike any other movie Orson Welles ever made. It is really hard. I don't know how to say it. It's like a Giallo film where the victim is a movie.
Okay.
And it's his whole takedown of it's a takedown not just of Hollywood. It is that. Like that's a little less of a takedown and more a, like, unflinching look. It's like, yeah, this is shit we do. This is shit we do up here in Hollywood, in the film, in the picture business. And it's a little gross, it's a little fucked up. But the shining light throughout the whole thing is there is this unspoken aspect. And it is all the guys around the main character who are very obviously like people based on people Orson Welles knew. We're like, no, we're just gonna follow this guy anywhere. And they're like, why? And they're like, because he's the chief. He's the fucking, he's the the unnamed soldier from Six Who Wandered the World. He's fucking Baron Munchausen. He's the guy. We're just following him into anything, despite the fact that it gets us some really dark, uncomfortable territory, particularly for the time, because one of the things that they deal with, and it's amazing when you think about, oh my God, no wonder in the 60s they were worried about releasing this. A lot of it is about being gay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of it that is about being gay, and they kind of just tell you it's not in that kind of coded language. It's like, oh no, we're just gonna use the words. And the thing that's really interesting about it is the character who is gay is the one who's using all the horrible slurs because he's running into someone who is very obviously not only closeted but is really into, oh, those homosexuals over there, and is being very, oh, like, let's be polite about it.
A little too
Yeah,
protesty.
yeah. And the guy is played by John Huston. Yeah, like, he played by John Huston, just goes like, oh, just say it, teacher. He was a faggot. And he just, like, goes off because he's so angry. He's like, because the context is really obviously, no, all my life I got to deal with people like you. And you're why I can't be who I would prefer to be. And I have to be this other thing. This thing that is this persona, this falsely masculine persona that I have to put up, but I don't actually like. It's amazing. It is an amazing movie, and you watch it and you're like, no wonder nobody wanted to release this. Holy
Only it had Charlton
crap.
Heston and brown face. Then people would have
Then
accepted
people
it.
would have gone for it. Yeah, exactly.
I'm a Mexican.
Good.
Ay, ay, ay.
Oh my God.
Con Dios. Yeah, that was Hoof. Touch of Evil, classic film, obviously. Had to
Oh,
watch it in film
yeah.
class, but Hoof. Okay. So aside from, as well as playing H.P. Lovecraft, because I have to have fun, I portray other characters on the show. H.P. has a brother, P.H. Lovecraft, who shows up from time to time to create mischief. Carl Sagan has showed up on the show.
I saw that. I actually
then,
really like.
I have fun with Carl Sagan. I can't do that right after I've had a haircut. I have to make sure my hair is like poofed out just a little bit. But yeah, when I finally committed and got like the turtleneck and really awful 70s denim jacket, then I was like, or corduroy jacket, I was like, oh yeah. We're doing this. Because of this, there's like a community in the county that I'm in that does sort of impersonations, historical figures, folks like that. I've done Lovecraft for them. I've done Sagan for them. Like, okay, well, who else can you do? And I sort of was like, I don't know. I guess I could do, off the top of my head, Peter Sellers. And so, like, right, you're doing Peter Sellers for us. So I did Peter Sellers, and you can see the footage on my on AskLovecraft.com. One of my playlists is the whole Peter Sellers.
Oh my God, how do you play Peter Sellers?
I'll show you how I play Peter Sellers. Hello, I'm Peter Sellers. Hello. That was literally it. I just put on glasses and did an accent, and it was ridiculously hard because Peter Sellers spent so much of his life trying to bury who he was.
Yes.
And was like this, like, it was one of these things where, like, I mean, I've made my peace with Lovecraft and, sort of Lovecraft's thing. Like, in some ways I found Sellers to be more loathsome. Like,
I know what you mean.
Already the the fact that he, I found interviews of him where he's talking about how he loves playing Chinaman because he can go ching chong bing bong. And I'm like, oh, this is rough to watch.
Yeah.
And, the movies like The Party and Murder by Death, which again are sort of these like classic films, but beyond that, there's just no there.
Exactly.
He was trying to bury any sort of sense of personal responsibility in astrology and in superstition and in drugs and in all this kind of like just he just obviously hated himself, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
He obviously was so kind of like just never able to find any peace. And so that's what I had to do was I talked about how the whole thing, like his whole life is this kind of ghost story of trying to,
Yeah, he is. That's why I was curious about how you play Peter Sellers, because I'm like, one of the problems with Peter Sellers is he's really the ghost that haunts his own life. Like, how do you do that?
Well, okay. So, spoilers. If you guys actually want to go check out my Peter Sellers, you can just go to Ask Lovecraft Peter Sellers. So just type that into YouTube. But at the very end, and it's not a huge secret because it's right on his Wikipedia page. Peter Sellers is not his real name. His real name is something like Henry Sellers or William Sellers or something like that. Peter Sellers was his brother who died name. and his parents just used it for him. I don't know if it was like it may have even been like a miscarriage or a stillbirth or something.
What? This I
So
didn't
like
know
you're
about.
so yeah, so I didn't know about this until like right before I did my show, and it made everything click into place. So yeah, Peter Sellers is being called Peter Sellers by his parents, even though it's not his real name. That's the name of his dead brother who never really lived. So like has all this like potential that, because he never failed in any way. He never accomplished anything, but he like what he could have been presumably can forever overshadow whatever Peter Sellers did or whatever actual,
Whatever the Peter
Sellers.
Sellers we know did. Yeah.
Um,
Oh
and
man.
so like that was my final sort of thing, was talking about, you're coming here to meet the real Peter Sellers. Well, the real Peter Sellers died in infancy. So hi. Richard, that's right. Richard Henry Sellers. That's his real name. So that uh I think the folks, the nice rural Ohio folks who came out to see my show, I don't think were expecting it to be that dark. But I gave them, I did my Doctor Strangelove, and my various other impressions, so like I gave them that, but I didn't want the show to be just that. It felt like it needed to touch on, again, the humanity, right? That's what I like to
Yeah,
explore
yeah.
when playing people. And that was hard. That was one of the hardest evenings of acting that I've done in a while.
Damn. How long was the show?
So I think the whole thing came to just about like 25 minutes or something like that. It wasn't very long. Um, but to sort of do this again, my work is not really scripted. It's like semi improvised, semi kind of, worked over in my head. So I sort of know where it's going to go. I know what beats I want to get to. But I'm, sort of riffing with the audience and being kind of, as I go along. And that was a difficult headspace to get into, which is weird because again, Peter Sellers, oh, funny guy, Pink Panther, haha.
No, Peter.
Rough. And
Yeah, yeah.
and he also had a failed they just released a documentary about a failed movie that was never released that he was in, where he was just going crazy and like faked a heart attack to get out of filming and all sorts of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I still remember. I was his biography. Shit, I can't remember what it was, but I was
Oh,
reading this
yeah, there's a
piece.
few.
Yeah, and it was just him.
There's been a few of his yeah,
Yeah, but I don't know. I can't remember. It's been a really long time. Where
sure.
basically his wife has died, and he has a kid. I mean, how many wives did he had? Like could not hold a marriage together.
Oh,
Um,
three to four. At one point, he tried to get engaged to, and he may have actually successfully gotten engaged to Liza Minnelli, but I'm pretty sure they were both married at the time. So,
yeah, something like that, But so this one wife had died, and the kid, his son. Oh, that's right. It was an article written by his son. Um, was recounting the fact that he was crying because his mom had died, and all Peter Sellers' father could say was, "Don't worry, son, I'll get another one."
no, it's again, there was just there was
What?
nothing, there. There was no connection, and then yeah, when he died, all of his money went to like the sort of estranged wife he had at the time, did not go to any of his kids, and then she died young, and it all went to this other kid she had like after he had died. So like all like the whole seller's fortune just went to some random person who was like, I guess I inherited from this dude. I don't know.
I don't know whose he is. Clouseau? Yeah, whatever. Great. I'm gonna put this all into to my fucking Tabasco sauce business. You
Seller's
know?
Tabasco.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, you know, that'd be a thing legacy. So yeah, so Sellers is that was the last new character that I've had to kind of play with in a while, and it was hard. That was very hard. And I've played Eichmann, so like when I say I've played difficult
Hmm.
people, like somehow Peter Sellers comes out on top.
Well, yeah. But I know what you mean by you're like, man, H.P. Lovecraft said a lot of horrible shit, but somehow Sellers is a little more loathsome.
Well, it's the
I know what you mean.
it's the the Big Lebowski thing, right? I mean, say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, at least it's
This
an
is an
ethos,
ethos. Yeah. There's a bit there, because for lack of a better way of putting it, like, yeah, with Lovecraft you get a feeling for who the man is. you know, with what was good, what was great, what was terrible, and what was holy fucking shit. You know, like just what is so fucking dark.
Yeah.
With
Well, and he
Sellers,
left so much. He left so much
oh
for us,
yeah,
right? I mean, the letters are like there's so many of them, and we keep finding more, and they sort of keep revealing new and new sides of it. My friend Bobby Deary, who did the Sex and Cthulhu mythos, is right now working on the book about Lovecraft and his racism, and like going through his like list. And he
oh
sent me
man,
the like big, massive like sheet of quotes. And I'm like, good
whoa,
luck, friend. I hope you take a nice spa weekend after you go through that. But he's he's trying to wrestle with this question of how do we deal with it in context, and how do we deal with like how Lovecraft adjusted over time, but also recognize that he didn't adjust. Like
yeah,
he, for someone who was willing to accept new data and adjust his thinking about science, about art, about politics, he went from being very conservative and right wing to like being a borderline socialist by the end of his life. But when presented with like, no, it doesn't matter what shape your skull is, like that doesn't affect intelligence or criminality. It was just racism.
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah. It's
and yeah, and that's something. And as far as doing that as an artist and as an actor, I don't try to, I don't make my show about it. I don't want to do the whole
well,
like, all right,
yeah,
everyone, it's the racism hour. I just did actually an episode about his cat, with the rather infamous name,
yes,
uh, because I was getting so many kind of snarky questions about like, hey, what's the name of your cat? Tell us the name of your cat. And I'm like, I'm just going to do an episode that I can just link to have that be dealt with, because it needs to be dealt with. Like I think as an actor, as someone who makes money off of Lovecraft, and if you would like to give me money for portraying Lovecraft, you can go to patreon.com/Ask Lovecraft. As someone who makes money off of Lovecraft, I think that it's really important to be as honest as possible, because I I think that there's a real tendency for a lot of folks, because Lovecraft is a mega business, however many Kickstarters that use Lovecraft or Cthulhu or
oh yeah,
Azathoth or whatever, like folks cash in on Lovecraft's name. I can't and think so much of the defensive-ness around Lovecraft is, let's not kill the golden goose, guys. Like, we don't want.
right, right.
I think most people, there is this. I think most of the defensiveness comes from the fact that people so identify with it, right? Like,
Yeah,
if if
I think most of it
if I
is a
found out that
genuine
like Terry
unease.
Pratchett, if I found out like Terry Pratchett was like, beating up his, kids, like I would feel like, no, like so much of myself is invested in Terry Pratchett and like what he
Yeah,
wrote and
yeah,
what he means to me. I think there's that. Most of the defensiveness comes from that, like, oh, if people are attacking Lovecraft for being racist, they're attacking me for liking something that's racist. But I think as an adult, I feel like we can appreciate complex art. I can appreciate Jodorowsky while also like acknowledging that he kind of assaulted a woman on his set for his
yeah,
art,
yeah,
and that's gross.
yeah, yeah. It also the distance of history, man, it helps a
The fact
lot.
that Lovecraft's like not around, like Mel Gibson, making movies about
Yes, yes,
about like massive Jewish conspiracies, yes, that is helpful.
yeah, and like I don't know how else to put it, because for lack of a better way of putting it, while it did definitely affect Lovecraft's work, it's not an overt statement. He
Except
never,
for that cat.
except for the cat. Yeah,
It
you know.
comes out like, there are definitely like guerrilla videos that get like mentioned, and like there
Oh
is
yeah,
weird like miscegenation stuff in Shadow over Innsmouth. Like, I don't think you can completely separate from the art. I think and people argue that, well, his fear of the other is based in his fear of other races, like it's all commingled. I think it all feeds on each other. And again,
yeah,
you can
yeah.
still enjoy Rats in the Wall. Rats in the Wall is still a creepy
It's still a
story,
really
even with
good
this.
story. Yeah.
And I recorded an audio version of that once and had to say that name like 37 times. Like, that cat is named more in that story than any other character.
I know, right? Oh my god.
So,
But like
yep.
it never this is gonna sound weird. I don't know how to say it, but like because I've talked a lot about like my why with Mel Gibson I have a much harder time than with some other artists, like even like say Polanski, because at the end of the day, I didn't watch a Polanski movie and watch the movie come to a screeching halt for him to say, by the way, I like having sex with 14-year-old girls. Like that didn't happen. And with Gibson, it kind of does. Like all of his like feelings kind of do just sort of end up there on the screen, and you're like, Mel, are you really gonna bring the look? The Passion Play's already anti-Semitic. That's already a problem, but are we really gonna bring this movie to a screeching halt every 20 minutes so that we can get misogynistic as well? Oh my god, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
didn't see Apocalypto. Was that better?
oh, it does. Well, it still does it. It's
Okay, there we go.
it still
Good
does
job,
it,
guys.
but it's not misogyny this time. This time it's manifest destiny, and I'm like, God damn it, dude! Like 5 minutes, like 30 seconds to credits. All of a sudden, it's
Yeah.
like, that's when white man came. You're like, dude, that's not what the movie has been about. Why is this happening? Why all of a sudden is core? By the way, I thought we were dealing with the Mayans. If these are the Mayans and not the Aztecs, you're 500 years off. You know, like what the hell? What does Cortez have to do with anything? You know, like
We're time traveling conquistadors.
yeah, I know, right? And I was just that was the moment. I'm watching Apocalypto and I'm like, this is actually not that bad. I don't see why people hate this movie. You get to the end right before the credits and you're just like, oh, this is what people were talking about. Oh, it just completely shits the bed at the end.
I can't think of any better way to sign off than on head injuries and Mel Gibson. Thank you so much for bringing me on. This has been an
Oh yeah,
absolute treat.
absolutely. Would you mind doing me a favor? Like the book that's all about Lovecraft and his writings on sex and things like that. Is that something that I can read? Because like I'm fascinated
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, so it's called Sex and the Cthulhu Mythos. It's my bright pink book right up there. The author is Bobby Deary or Robert Deary. And yeah, I think it should still be available. I feel like there's a German edition that's come out because, of course, the Germans would really want to get up on this.
Right. Sex and the Cthulhu Mythos by Bobby.
Deary, Derie.
There it is.
Dan Williams, or yeah, art on the cover, which is just
And this is
let you know what you're getting into.
Oh my god. I'm fascinated because this is well probably you could probably guess because of the cameo you did for me that is something that actually like I'm actually kind of fascinated by.
Well, I mean, he gets into not just what's in his stories, but also like his relationship with his aunts and with like he had gay friends, and so like it really gets into like how not just it impacts the fiction, but just it was in his life and what we can tell about what he knew about different movements. There's at one point he did go on this big rant about like the importance of feminism and like how we need to have like women in the workplace and equality, but he then ruins the moment by saying that like why it's like the good Nordic stock where the women would go like fighting in the field with the men, unlike the feminized Asiatics, who oppress their women. And you're like, oh, like 2 steps forward, my friend. 2 steps forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, Liam, it was good talking to you. Glad you could spend some time with us.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Folks, just go to asklovecraft.com. That'll take you right to the YouTube page. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at Leman Kessler. If you're interested in I've got a fun Facebook group that talks about Lovecraft and all sorts of fun ways without without any white supremacy, which can be hard to do in certain Lovecraft circles.
Oh,
the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society. We are chill group of folks. So that's on Facebook. And otherwise, yeah, it's been an absolute blast, and enjoy the rest of the program.
All right, you take care, Liam. It's good you spending some time with us. It's also good talking to you again, just in general.
It's been a blast. Have fun.
Yeah.
I need to go find my Robert Anton Wilson now.
Oh yeah, do. It's worth it.
Got to figure out what the dog star is saying.
It's woof.
Oh, all right.
And within that, yeah.